You've probably been planting tomatoes in containers like they're just little garden beds with handles. And that right there is where most folks go wrong. A tomato in a pot ain't living the same life as a tomato out in the ground. It's got less room, less forgiveness, hotter roots, thirstier soil, and if you miss one small thing at the beginning, that plant will spend the whole summer trying to recover from it. Now, I know that sounds simple. Put dirt in a bucket, stick a tomato in it, water it, wait for red fruit. Well, that's what most people do. But the old way, the mountain way, pays attention to things most folks walk right past. The feel of the soil, the size of the container, where the morning sun hits, how deep that stem goes, what happens to water after a hard rain. And I'll tell you something else too. A tomato plant will forgive a lot of mistakes, but it won't forgive being planted in a shallow, hot, hungry little pot and then being asked to feed a family. I've grown tomatoes in all kinds of things over the years: old wash tubs, wooden boxes, feed buckets, cracked crocks, half barrels, and once, Lord have mercy, even an old metal lard somebody had drilled holes in. Some of them worked fine. Some of them taught me a lesson I didn't forget. And that's the part I want to share with you today, because if you get container tomatoes right at planting time, you can save yourself a whole summer of yellow leaves, split fruit, blossom end rot, dry plants, and disappointment. See, the first thing folks miss is that the container is not just a container. It's the whole world that tomato gets to live in. Out in the garden, roots can go hunting. They can run sideways, go deeper, find a little moisture here and a little nutrition there. But in a pot, once those roots hit the wall, that's it. They turn around and keep circling if you let them. So if you start with a small container, you've already told that plant it has to live a hard life. For a tomato, I don't much care for anything under 10 gallons, and if you're growing one of those big, indeterminate tomatoes, the kind that keeps climbing and reaching all summer, I'd rather see 15 to 20 gallons if you can manage it. Now, I know plenty of garden centers sell pretty little tomato pots that look tidy on a porch. They'll grow a plant, sure, but growing a plant and growing a strong, steady tomato crop ain't always the same thing. If you're new around here and you like this kind of old garden talk, the sort that comes from dirt under the fingernails more than fancy words, you're welcome to stay a while and subscribe. I try to share what I've learned from these mountains, from my granddad, and from getting things wrong enough times to finally notice what nature was trying to tell me. Now, let's talk about drainage, because this is one of those plain things people think they already understand. You need holes. Not one tiny hole in the middle. Not a few little pinholes that clog up after the first watering. You need good drainage, and you need it around the bottom where water can actually leave. A tomato wants steady moisture, but it does not want wet feet. Roots need air just as sure as they need water. If that pot stays soggy, those roots begin to struggle, and once roots struggle, the top of the plant starts telling on them. Back in the mountains, folks reused what they had. That wash tub got holes punched in it. That wooden box had gaps between the boards. That old bucket got drilled proper before anything was planted. My granddad used to say, if water can't leave, sickness will stay. He wasn't talking science, but modern growers would tell you the same thing in a different way. Poor drainage encourages root disease, oxygen-starved roots, and weak growth. But here's the interesting part. Drainage holes ain't enough if the soil itself is wrong. A lot of folks go out to the garden, shovel up some soil, dump it in a pot, and think they've saved money. I understand that. I've done it. But garden soil in a container can turn heavy, tight, and sour. It compacts after watering. It can hold too much water one day and crack dry the next. It may bring weed seeds or disease along with it, too in the ground. That soil has worms, air pockets, living layers, and room to breathe. In a pot, it can become something closer to a brick. For container tomatoes, I want a loose, rich, well-draining mix, not fluffy like dust, and not heavy like clay. A good potting mix is a fine beginning, but I like to improve it. I'll add aged compost, not fresh manure, not hot compost, but good dark finished compost that smells earthy. Then I like some pine bark fines or something similar to help hold structure. And a bit of perlite if the mix feels too dense. Some folks use peat, some use coco coir. Both can hold moisture, though they behave a little different. The point is this: you want soil that holds enough water for a hot day, but still lets the roots breathe. Now, don't go filling the bottom with rocks thinking that improves drainage. That's one of those ideas that gets passed around because it sounds like it ought to work. But in containers, a rock layer can actually leave the wettest soil sitting higher in the pot where the roots are. Researchers and experienced container growers have shown that water behaves differently in a pot than most folks imagine. Better to fill the container with a proper mix from top to bottom and make sure the holes work. Before I plant, I moisten the mix. Not soak it into mud, just dampen it. Dry potting mix can be stubborn. Water will run down the sides and out the bottom while the middle stays dry as a bone. So I wet it slowly, mix it with my hands, and feel it. If it clumps lightly when squeezed but falls apart when touched, that's close. If water streams out like soup, it's too wet. If it blows around like wood ash, it's too dry. Now comes the tomato itself, and this is where the old way matters. Most vegetable plants need to be planted at the same depth they were growing in their little pot. Tomatoes are different. Tomatoes can grow roots along the buried stem. That's one of their gifts. Those little bumps you sometimes see along the stem can become roots if they're covered with moist soil. So when I plant a tomato in a container, I plant it deep. I'll pinch off the lowest leaves and set that plant down so a good portion of the stem is under the soil. But don't just shove it down into cold wet mix and call it done. Think about what that stem is going to do. It's going to build a stronger root system, and in a container, root system is everything. More roots mean better water uptake, better nutrient uptake, and a plant that can stand a hot afternoon without wilting like a dish rag. If the tomato transplant is tall and leggy, I'll sometimes plant it at an angle. Lay part of the stem sideways in a shallow trench across the top of the container, then turn the growing tip upward. That buried stem roots out, and the top finds the sky. Now, in a pot, you may not have much room for that, so deep planting often works better. But the idea is the same. Don't waste that stem. Turn it into roots. Here's something else most folks miss. Don't fill the container all the way to the rim before planting. Leave yourself an inch or two at the top. That space matters. It lets you water deeply without everything spilling over the side. Later, it gives you room for mulch. And mulch in a tomato container is not decoration, it's protection. A bare container in summer can heat up fast. The sun hits the sides. The surface dries. Roots near the edge can get hotter than you think. A layer of straw, shredded leaves, untreated grass clippings that haven't gone to seed, or even a little bark mulch can keep the surface cooler and hold moisture steadier. I don't pile mulch against the tomato stem. I leave a little breathing room around it. But I do cover the soil. That one small thing can make the difference between watering once in the morning and finding your plant crying for help by supper. Now let's talk about where that container sits. Because a pot is movable, and that's both a blessing and a trap. Tomatoes need sun, most folks know that, 6 hours at least, and 8 is better in many places. But container tomatoes in full blazing afternoon heat, especially beside a wall, on concrete, or on a deck that holds heat, can suffer. The roots get hot, the plant drinks hard, fruit can sun-scald, blossoms may drop when temperatures get too high, so I like morning sun and good light through the day, but if you live somewhere with brutal afternoon heat, a little late-day relief can help. In the mountains, we watched the way sunlight moved across the place. A south-facing wall could push a tomato early in the season, warming it when nights were still cool. But in deep summer, that same wall could bake a pot like an oven. Nature changes the rules as the season moves along. You've got to watch. Set the pot where air can move too, not in a wind tunnel, but not tucked into a dead corner where leaves stay damp all morning. Tomato disease loves still, humid air and wet foliage. Modern horticulture says airflow helps reduce leaf disease pressure, and any old gardener who's watched blight move through a crowded patch could have told you that without naming a single fungus. Now, before you even plant, put your support in place. Don't wait until the tomato gets big and floppy. That's how stems break and roots get damaged. In a container, I like a sturdy cage, a stake, or a trellis set at planting time. If you're growing a determinate tomato, one that grows to a certain size and sets a crop more or less together, a strong cage may be enough. If you're growing an indeterminate tomato, you need to think taller and stronger. Those plants don't know when to quit. And here's a little thing. A container full of tomato plant can get top-heavy. A tall plant in a light plastic pot can tip over in a summer storm. Use a broad container. Add weight if needed, or place it where it won't catch the worst wind. I've seen beautiful tomatoes laid down in the yard after one thunderstorm, roots torn loose, fruit scattered. All because nobody thought about balance. Now, feeding. A tomato in the ground can reach around. A tomato in a pot eats what you give it, and once nutrients wash out the drainage holes, they're gone. But don't make the mistake of feeding it like you're trying to grow a jungle. Too much nitrogen gives you a grand-looking green plant with not much fruit. You'll stand there admiring leaves while waiting on tomatoes that never seem to come. At planting, I like a balanced start. Good compost helps. A slow-release organic fertilizer can work fine if used according to the label. Some folks use tomato fertilizer with a little extra phosphorus and potassium. That can be helpful, especially once flowering begins. But more is not always better. Roots can be burned by too much fertilizer, and container plants have nowhere to escape. You know, old-timers used what they had: compost, leaf mold, well-rotted manure, fish scraps in some places, wood ash in careful amounts. But I want to be clear here. Just because something is old doesn't mean you throw it in blindly. Fresh manure can burn plants and may carry harmful bacteria. Too much wood ash can raise soil pH and throw nutrients out of balance. Kitchen scraps in a container can attract pests and smell bad. The old way was never about being careless. It was about paying attention. A tomato likes a slightly acidic soil, generally around the mid-sixes on the pH scale. Most quality potting mixes are already close enough. You don't need to turn planting into a chemistry exam. But if your plants always struggle in containers, or leaves show strange nutrient problems, a simple soil test or using a trusted potting mix can save a lot of guessing. Now, I want to tell you about the mistake that causes more container tomato trouble than nearly anything else: uneven watering. People see blossom end rot and think the plant needs calcium. Sometimes they add eggshells, lime, tablets, sprays, all manner of things. And sometimes the soil may indeed be low in available calcium, especially in a poor mix. But often, blossom end rot happens because the plant can't move calcium properly during fruit development, and that is strongly tied to inconsistent moisture. Dry, soaked. Dry, soaked. That cycle hurts the plant. A container tomato wants steady water, not pampered, not drowned. Steady, in hot weather, that might mean daily watering. In very hot, windy weather, maybe more than once. In cool, cloudy weather, maybe not. You don't water by the calendar. You water by the plant, the pot, the soil, and the weather. I use my finger. Push it down into the mix. If the top is dry but it's still moist an inch or two down, you may wait. If it's dry down there, water deeply. And when you water, don't sprinkle the leaves like you're blessing the plant. Water the soil. Let it soak until water runs from the bottom. That tells you the whole root zone got a drink. A saucer under a pot can help on a porch, but don't let the plant sit in standing water all day. That can suffocate roots. If water remains after a while, empty it. The goal is moist soil, not swamp soil. Now, here's one of those clues nature gives if you'll listen. If your tomato wilts every afternoon but perks up by evening, it may just be heat stress. The plant is losing water faster than roots can move it. But if it stays wilted even after the sun eases, or the soil is wet and it's still wilting, something else may be wrong. Could be root trouble. Could be disease. Could be a damaged stem. Don't just pour more water on every wilted plant. Look first. Around this point in the season, I'd sure like to hear from you. Did your family have some old container trick for tomatoes? Maybe a wash tub by the porch, a bucket beside the smokehouse, or a certain compost mix your grandmother swore by. Leave it down in the comments if you feel like sharing. I read those stories, and truth is, a lot of old wisdom is still alive because somebody takes the time to tell it. Let's talk varieties for a minute, because not every tomato is happy in a pot. You can grow big heirloom tomatoes in containers, but they need room, support, food, and patience. A giant slicer in a small bucket is asking for trouble. For containers, determinate and dwarf varieties often behave better. Patio tomatoes, bush tomatoes, compact cherries, dwarf slicers, those can be fine choices. But if your heart is set on an old Appalachian-style tomato, a big pink or red heirloom, give it a large container and treat it like it matters. Cherry tomatoes are often generous in pots. They set fruit steadily, handle stress better than some large fruited types, and give you that little handful every time you walk by. But they can get wild, too. Don't underestimate them. A cherry tomato can turn into a green monster if it's happy. Now, pruning is another place folks get tangled up. In a container, I like to remove the lower leaves once the plant gets growing, especially leaves that touch the soil or crowd the base. That helps airflow and reduces soil splash. Soil splash can carry disease spores onto leaves. Mulch helps with that too. I don't strip the plant bare. Leaves are food factories. The plant needs them, but I do keep the bottom clean. With indeterminate tomatoes, you can prune some suckers to keep the plant manageable. A sucker is that little shoot that grows in the crotch between the main stem and a leaf branch. If you let every sucker grow, you may get more stems, but in a container. That can mean more demand for water and nutrients than the pot can support. I don't believe in one rigid rule for every plant. I look at the plant. If it's too crowded, I thin it. If it's growing balanced and healthy, I don't fuss it to death. Determinate tomatoes are different. They set fruit on a more compact plant, and heavy pruning can reduce your harvest. So know what you're growing before you start pinching everything that looks new. Now, tomatoes pollinate themselves. Mostly, each flower has what it needs. But still air, high humidity, or extreme heat can interfere with fruit set. Out in the garden, bees and wind shake the blossoms. On a sheltered porch, sometimes they don't get much movement. So once flowers open, I may give the cage or stake a gentle tap in the morning. Nothing rough, just enough to shake the blossoms. Some growers use electric toothbrushes in greenhouses. I just give it a little mountain nudge and let it be. One thing I learned over time is that container tomatoes talk early. They show trouble faster than garden tomatoes because their world is smaller. Pale new growth may hint at nutrient trouble. Purple-tinged leaves in cool weather may show phosphorus uptake is slow. Yellow lower leaves can mean age, nitrogen shortage, too much water, or disease. Brown crispy edges may mean drought stress, salt buildup from fertilizer, or root trouble. You can't diagnose everything from one leaf, but you can learn to notice patterns. If you fertilize with liquid feed, go gentle. Half strength more often is usually safer than heavy feeding all at once, though you should follow product directions. And every so often, if you've been fertilizing a lot, water deeply enough to flush excess salts from the mix. Container soil can build up salts over time, especially if water evaporates and fertilizer remains behind. That can stress roots. Now pests. A tomato in a pot is not safe just because it's on a porch. Aphids, hornworms, whiteflies, spider mites, leaf-footed bugs, they'll find it if conditions suit them. The old way is to look. Turn leaves over. Watch for chewed edges. Look for dark droppings from hornworms. A hornworm can strip a plant before you finish your second cup of coffee if you ain't paying attention. Well, maybe that's a bit much, but not by far. I don't reach for harsh sprays first. I pick off what I can. I use a strong stream of water for aphids. Insecticidal soap can help with soft-bodied pests when used correctly, but don't spray in hot sun and don't assume more is better. Read the label. Nature has helpers too. Lady beetles, lacewings, parasitic wasps, birds. If you poison everything at the first sign of trouble, you may kill the ones that were coming to help. Disease is harder in humid summers. Early blight, septoria leaf spot, and other leaf diseases can show up, especially when leaves stay wet. Water the soil, not the leaves. Mulch. Give airflow. Remove infected lower leaves when you see them. But don't compost diseased foliage unless you know your compost gets hot enough. Keep your tools clean. Rotate if you can, though in containers rotation may mean starting fresh with clean mix and washed pots the next year. And that brings me to something nobody likes to hear. Don't reuse old tomato potting mix forever. You can refresh some container mix for flowers or non-related crops, maybe. But tomatoes are heavy feeders, and disease can build up. If a plant struggled with disease, I don't plant another tomato in that same old mix and expect miracles. At the very least, refresh heavily with new mix and compost. Better yet, use fresh potting mix for tomatoes each season if disease has been a problem. Wash the container too, soap and water first. Some folks disinfect with a mild bleach solution, then rinse well. That's not fancy. That's just starting clean. Now, let me tell you the old Appalachian part that matters most. It ain't a secret ingredient. It ain't a magic fertilizer. It ain't a rusty nail, a fish head, or a prayer whispered over the pot, though I won't speak against prayer. The old way is observation. You set that tomato where you pass it every day. You notice if leaves curl in the heat. You notice if the mulch is dry. You notice if the flowers are dropping. You notice if the fruit swells too fast after a rain and starts to split. You don't wait 3 weeks and then wonder what happened. Container tomatoes reward the gardener who pays attention. They punish the one who plants and forgets. When fruit begins forming, watering becomes even more important. Big swings in moisture can cause splitting, especially in thin-skinned varieties. After a dry spell, a heavy watering or sudden rain can make fruit swell faster than the skin can stretch. You can't control rain, but you can keep the plant from getting bone dry before rain comes. Mulch helps. Consistent watering helps. Harvesting nearly ripe tomatoes before a big storm can help too. Let them finish on the counter if you need to. A tomato with color will often ripen just fine indoors. Flavor. Now that's something folks argue about. Some say container tomatoes never taste as good as garden-grown. I don't think that has to be true. Flavor depends on variety, sunlight, plant health, ripeness, and watering. Overwatering near harvest can dilute flavor some, and stress can hurt production. The best flavor usually comes from a healthy plant, steady care, and fruit picked when it's truly ripe. Not rock-hard orange, not half green unless frost is coming. Ripe. When you harvest, don't yank the vine. Hold the stem and twist gently, or use snips. A container plant can be pulled and shaken easier than one in the ground. Treat it kindly. Every green fruit left on that plant is still counting on the roots you built at planting time. As the season wears on, the plant may tire. Leaves age. Heat builds. Nutrients run low. Keep feeding lightly if it's still producing. Remove dead leaves. Keep watering steady. If the plant becomes diseased beyond saving, don't be sentimental to the point of spreading trouble. Sometimes the best garden wisdom is knowing when to pull a plant and clean up. And if frost threatens near the end, you've got choices. Move the pot if it's small enough. Cover the plant. Pick mature green tomatoes and ripen them indoors. Or make fried green tomatoes, if that's your way. Around here, wasting food was never much admired. So if you remember nothing else, remember this. A tomato in a container needs a big enough home, loose living soil, deep planting, steady moisture, early support, gentle feeding, mulch, sunlight with some common sense, and a gardener who looks before reacting. That's the old Appalachian way. Not complicated, just attentive. Most folks miss it because they're looking for the trick. But the trick is that there ain't one. The plant tells the truth every day. Leaves tell it. Soil tells it. Blossoms tell it. Fruit tells it. Nature always leaves clues. And if you slow down enough to see those clues, even a tomato growing in an old bucket by the porch can feed you better than a row planted careless in the finest ground. Well, I reckon that's enough tomato talk for one sitting. I hope your containers are deep, your soil is rich, your leaves stay green, and your first ripe tomato tastes like summer itself. Take care of your plants, take care of the ground beneath your feet, and don't forget to respect the quiet wisdom nature keeps offering. This is Elias Mullins, wishing you a peaceful evening from the mountains. Until next time, keep your hands in the soil and your eyes open.
The mountain air cleanses the soul, and the earth gives us what we need if we just listen. Be patient and watch the garden grow.